Welcome into another edition of the Half Court Press podcast. I'm John Nyatawa. He's Chris Heady. Actually have a decent amount to talk about today on July 1. A lot of Nebraska stuff. Chris, you polled your Twitter followers for some questions about Husker hoops. We got some updates to get to. One player leaves, one player in. But let's start with UConn, man.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of like the big news item of the day in the college basketball world. UConn joining the Big East, rejoining the Big East after 7 years apart from the league that it was an original member, one of 7 original members back in, 1973, I think.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, it was a while ago, obviously.
Yeah.
A ton of history, obviously, with UConn and the Big East. The league split apart for basically because of football. And now UConn's back in, which means we get UConn men's hoops in Omaha every year. UConn women's hoops, maybe should have led with that because that program is
that's a huge deal now. Yeah,
is a powerhouse. To see that team come to Omaha every year, what a treat that is for local college basketball fans, local sports fans. Actually, that team transcends sports. Really, what Gino RM has built there, like that's incredible. So,
oh yeah.
What's your reaction? How you feel? Like, I don't know. Did you grow up watching Big East basketball, or are you more the Big Ten? Big 12?
I mean, I watched a lot of Big 12, but I loved watching the conference tournament on ESPN, Syracuse and UConn, and that those are the two that come to mind because I feel like they always matched up at some point. Are those the two teams that played that 7 overtime game? It was Syracuse and somebody, right?
Yeah, sounds right. They had some epic moments. UConn, Georgetown for sure.
Yeah, right. Pitt, the UConn Pitt game, the Kemba back, step back, that which remains one of the all-time great game winners that I've ever seen, like ever. It was this weird thing in high school when, it was the first, like the conference tournaments were usually like the week right before spring break, so we were doing nothing, and so because it's Kansas and it's kind of a basketball crazy state, we would just like watch conference tournaments in class. And I remember like the whole class going wild after that step back, and it was like, holy cow, this is great. I think this is a good thing for the Big East for like a million reasons. But I think that the Big East is one of the best conferences in college basketball. But I think that there is still this perception where it gets left out at times or gets forgotten at times because there's not really big brand name teams like there is Georgetown and Seton Hall, but like UConn is a different echelon of college basketball.
No doubt.
And I think that it adds so much credibility to this current Big East. And this isn't anything to discredit Butler or Creighton by that, at all. But I think adding UConn just makes it feel more solid as a powerhouse conference. Does that make sense?
For sure. I totally agree because like Creighton, Butler, Xavier, Xavier's been one of the most consistent programs in college basketball over the last 2 decades, but it just they don't have the national branding, the national reach, the ability to kind of raise eyebrows in the college basketball world. Like that takes years to build sort of that credibility, that response from college basketball fans. UConn has it. Like they have that prestige, that stature. And honestly, when you look at the Big East, there's not – you mentioned Georgetown, but Georgetown hasn't been good.
Right.
St. John's maybe, but St. John's hasn't been good. So, Villanova obviously has added a lot of credibility to the league, and it's raised its profile since the new Big East was formed. But there hasn't really been a clear sort of number 2 team from a national like big brand reputation. It's hard to like put into words, but like it's a perception thing. And while I do think some of these teams have been overlooked and underrated, as you say, sometimes the Big East gets lost in the conversation sometimes, but that's part of like this whole branding thing. So UConn helps fix that. And I was thinking, the Big East had, right when it formed with 10 members, I feel like the conversation began. Are you going to add an 11th? Are you going to add a 12th? Like, when is the league going to expand? And leadership always said, like, we'll consider it, but it's not like – I think Bruce Rasmussen told me once, Creighton's athletic director told me, like, it's been an agenda item every year. Like, they've always talked about it, but it's not – they've never felt the need to jump or to include somebody or to really consider it because they haven't necessarily found an option that they like. But with UConn, like like you said, it fits exactly. It just makes sense. And if the Big East had to pick a team to say we want to expand to 11, I think UConn would be number one.
Well, and it's really interesting too because I was just going through. UConn never won the American Athletic Conference. Their last regular season conference title was in 2006, and after they joined in that first year, they finished second in the league, and then they were kind of in the middle. And so it's interesting because we were talking about this little off air, but this was clearly a pull. This is something that they did to go away from their legacy and away from their history. And, you don't always want to make it exactly, compare it to Nebraska football, but it was their version of joining the Big Ten. And
that's what it felt like, man. Like, Nebraska went to the Big Ten for financial stability, just overall stability. The Big 12 was teetering. And that's what UConn did, right? Like, they were chasing the football money.
And then and
it makes
garbage.
Sense, right?
Yeah, it does. Again, a lot of college sports is just about money. And this was clearly about going to get some money on the football side and kind of fulfilling the rest of your obligations to the rest of the athletic department, even if that means basketball takes kind of a back seat. Well, obviously that went extremely poorly because UConn football is a disaster. And at some point they were like, you know what, like we screwed up this so hard that we just need to go back to the Big East. And that's a good thing, I think, for college sports. And now I'm really curious, I think UConn's a pretty decent program. It's not what it was, in the 2000s and early 2010s. But now they got Dan Hurley, and they seem to be. Let me check their records. So 2 years in Dan Hurley, they went 16-17 and then 19-12. So that's trending in the right direction.
Yep.
So I'm curious.
Last year they ended 8-2, like won 8 of their final 10 games. They're bringing back a lot, and they're adding a top 25 recruiting class.
So that's why I think it's good too, is that they're joining as they're gaining steam.
Yeah,
because that's what you want. You don't want Rutgers to join the conference and then be horrible. Like then it just doesn't look very good. But if you add Connecticut and they're good, you're good to go. Right. Like then it looks like a genius move for the whole conference.
Yeah, it's interesting that the athletic department. And now a lot of this was money driven. And so they said, hey, let's pare down what we've done with football and let's focus more attention on basketball and appeasing a fan base. Because, you heard the complaints. They didn't like going to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and where's East Carolina? I don't know. Like East Carolina, Tulane, going to
Orlando. They were going to Orlando, which not that Orlando was bad, but it's kind of a long trip down the eastern seaboard.
Right. Wichita, I guess. Although that's a good game, but
Let's see. East Carolina is in Greenville, North Carolina.
They're in the American, aren't they? East Carolina.
I think so. Yeah.
So I guess it makes sense that that the fan base, there was a lot of angst about the move, and you can tell that there's sort of been this celebratory feel within UConn within the UConn faithful for the last year since whenever this was announced, and now it's official today. UConn's part of the Big East. So
I'm curious what you think the Creighton reaction is. Like, do you think Creighton fans or Creighton as a program, are they excited that UConn is joining the conference? And just what do you think what have you gauged from the Creighton perspective?
Well, if I'm a Creighton fan, I'm loving it, right? Like this is like basketball Christmas, having the like I said from off the top, that you get these big brands, men's and women's teams from UConn coming to your house, to think that the biggest women's basketball dynasty in America is going to be playing its games in DJ Sokol Arena.
Yeah, that's gonna be great.
How could you miss that ticket? Maybe they moved it to CHI, but and then from a men's basketball standpoint, I wasn't covering the team then, but a decade ago, Creighton would have celebrated bringing DePaul in, for a game. And now you get Georgetown, Villanova, UConn, the rest of the entire Big East schedule, and some of the teams are lining up in non-conference now that they have this Big East affiliation. Like, it's incredible the level or the increase, the rise that Creighton basketball has experienced just from being a part of the Big East. Like, not apart from what it's done on the court, just that affiliation with the Big East, what it does, and from an enjoyment factor, and it's just cool to think that UConn's going to be in there. And I saw you look across the Big East, like Creighton, I think, sent out a tweet from its official Twitter account saying, "Hey, welcome to the Big East." I think most of the Big East schools are doing something similar to UConn, being like, "Hey, come on in. We're glad you're here." And there is that joy there, I think, and I think it's genuine. But also, I do feel like UConn's going to be the team that everyone hates in like 2 years.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
It's the biggest school. Got a huge fan base. The fans, I'm sure there's always a level of arrogance whenever you have a fan base that's like won before and it's working its way back. And like we've noted, UConn's men's basketball could be a player on the national scene next year, maybe in 2 years. So all of a sudden UConn starts winning again. That fan base is going to be loud about it. And I think that the rest of the Big East is going to be like, "Shut up, UConn! Like, get out of here!"
Yeah, well, because they're gonna walk in and be like, "You never messed with us before. Like, you don't know what you're getting into."
Yeah,
and everyone's gonna be like, "Oh, shut up!" Like, it's gonna be great, and that's good. That's good. Like, you want some of that, like,
no doubt,
playful animosity within your conference, and I think that the Big East has it, but I don't know if it really has it like the Big Ten does. You know what I mean? But I could be wrong there. Do you feel like there's any? Like, is there one school that's like that right now in the Big East?
I don't know. I don't think so.
It could be Georgetown, but they're not very good.
Yeah, I feel like the East Coast, like Villanova's too good.
Yeah,
and everyone just like Jay Wright, man, that dude's
you can't.
Smooth.
Yeah,
like you can't hate on him.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of camaraderie within Big East circles right now, but UConn could disrupt that, which would make for some. I don't know. I think it'd be fun.
Yeah.
Dan Hurley on the sideline going wild, getting a tee, getting the fans excited. Like,
it's gonna be fantastic.
I think that's awesome.
So now they have 12. So now they have 11.
Yeah.
Who do you want to add for the 12th?
See, that's the thing. Like I mentioned, I thought UConn was the best ad that Big East could get, and now obviously odd number. Are they going to add another? My assumption is no, you won't see it. But if they could add one more team, I think Notre Dame would be great.
Oh, that's so good.
And now Notre Dame, everybody wants Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Everyone wants Notre Dame. So, like, Notre Dame's football team's independent, obviously, and it's got that thing rolling, and it's got an association with the ACC. Why would you leave the ACC? Totally get it. And the Big Ten has courted Notre Dame for years, obviously, and it never was able to find something that works. But the Big East, what it could sell is like, we don't care about your football team. Do whatever you want with it. You're independent. You got that deal with NBC. Just keep that rolling, but bring in your other sports and get back to the Big East brand. I think Notre Dame would be a cool ad, but again, I don't know if it makes any sense for Notre Dame. Like, the reason why this made sense for UConn is because its athletic department is in financial disarray right now. Like, they're cutting sports, and as you mentioned, football is a disaster. Like, they're trying to figure things out there. So they had to do something drastic to re-engage the fan base and start selling tickets to men's basketball games and raise that level of excitement and reinvigorate the entire athletic department. Notre Dame probably doesn't need that, so I don't know in what scenario it would, but I think that would be a cool ad.
That's good.
They also talked about like Gonzaga. Like, there's been talks about Gonzaga, but men's basketball only. Like a men's basketball only ad where
but that's a lot of travel for Gonzaga
for sure. And does Gonzaga need it? Like, it's doing just fine right now. I know it's got the West Coast affiliation, but like, it's killing it. So why would it need a major conference?
Yeah, it almost benefits Gonzaga by just like winning 30 games a year and not, because they've done it enough times that I've always been a Gonzaga. Like, I've never really bought into them. Like, when they're a 1 seed, I am always wary of them making it past like an 8. You know what I mean? But at the same time, when you win 30 games, pretty much every single year, or more than 25 games every single year, and you're always up at that 1-2 seed, you do that enough times, then it's like, well, why would we change this? Why would we try and mess with this? Here's my proposal. Okay, this both goes with your conference and my conference. So we're going to send Maryland to the Big East.
Big Ten sending us Maryland. All right.
Big East is going to get Maryland. They get whole at 12, and then KU added to the Big Ten.
Interesting. So KU is that. I was going to say you can't ship off Rutgers.
My first thought was we just ship Rutgers to the Big East. You can have them. Because they do play. I mean, they're big. Like they do play some Big East basketball. Like they like to. Bump around.
Big East. Rutgers joined the Big East in the 90s, right? So
right. And the other thing I thought too was the ACC has so many teams. Just like take Syracuse because it was in the Big East before, and like just take them. The ACC is so large. Right. It's so large.
I wonder how Syracuse fans feel about the association with the ACC too, because like it's not. Syracuse had some really good runs in the NCAA tournament since it joined the ACC. But not necessarily like, is it building the rivalries that it wanted to? Does it miss playing UConn and Georgetown? I wonder if you'll see this in college sports, like after we get done dealing with the pandemic and a number of years down the road, maybe the TV dollars for sports dramatically decrease. It feels like we're kind of in a bubble right now. So in a couple decades, maybe you'll see sort of college sports feel a need for nostalgia and fan appeasement, and
for sure
realigning just to because we miss it.
It's also this is, and we don't have to spend too long on this, but like when you talk about if there's going to be a football season, if there's going to be a men's basketball season, and the potential for games getting canceled, having to reschedule quickly, and worrying about traveling across the country and all these things. I mean, conferences were essentially set up because they were schools that were pretty close to each other that wanted to play sports against each other.
Yeah.
And then it became about getting the best deal and going to a bigger, more high-profile conference and making as much money as you can, all these things. And now it's almost like this could potentially bring it back down to a point where this year, if everything gets canceled or postponed or whatever, and you have to try and find a new partner to play a sports against, like you're going to go back to those schools that you played in the 80s and 90s and kind of created those great rivalries with. And I'm curious if that does happen, then what the response is, because then it's all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, I really, Nebraska played K-State. I really liked that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or like, I don't know. I could see that happening. I'm curious about it actually will happen.
Go back. You mentioned if you could swap out a team in the Big Ten, you'd swap out. Well, for the purposes of our little conversation, you're saying let's swap out Maryland, but ideally you could swap Rutgers out for KU. That's your dream scenario.
Yeah, but at the same time, like I also think that you could do the same thing with like Iowa State. I think Iowa State in the Big Ten would be really fun, and it's like they're kind of already in Big Ten country. Like they're pretty north for a Big 12 school at this point. And boy, would I love it to watch Fred Hoiberg coach against Iowa State twice a year.
That's about the only way it happens is if Iowa State and Nebraska somehow end up in the same conference.
Which would be like the only time that I think that would. I mean, I don't think Fred really would like to play. Play them very often.
Right. I like Notre Dame in the Big Ten. If
Notre Dame in the Big Ten is really good too.
I mean, think about Notre Dame playing Ohio State, Michigan every year. Michigan State. I mean, they do play these like Michigan. Obviously, has the rivalry with Notre Dame to play every year. I went to Purdue, and we loved facing Notre Dame. We love that matchup. It's like 2 hours down the road.
Well, I was gonna say, then you have this little trio of like Indiana, Purdue, Notre Dame, and Indiana. You know what I mean? Have they ever done like a tournament in Indianapolis with like those
basketball teams.
Yeah.
They've had that going for about 10 years now.
They do that? I don't think I realized that they did.
Yeah, it's Butler, Notre Dame, Indiana, Purdue.
Oh, that rocks.
Indiana and Purdue don't play each other, so they just Butler and Notre Dame trade off. So fantastic, man! They played at I think it's Bankers Life. That's where the Pacers play.
Yeah.
Play downtown. Crossroads Shootout, I think is the name of it.
Oh, that rocks. That's cool.
Yeah, would love to see something similar in pretty much every state, but
yes.
I guess here in Nebraska we have to settle with Nebraska and Creighton every year, which is not a bad bad game.
No,
all right, let's shift to Nebraska.
Okay.
There was some news. Now it's about 10 days old since we recorded just before this news broke. But Kobe King has left the program, and he's joined the program, but didn't actually get to campus. And then, within hours, it was announced that Elijah Wood was going to reclassify, join the 2020 class, and join the Huskers program. And now he's on campus. Chris, what's going on? Run us back through how this all went down.
Yeah, so essentially, from what I've been able to gather, Kobe King joined the program. He moved to Lincoln. He was in Nebraska's Black Lives Matter, My Life Matters promotional video that they put out on Twitter. But I don't think he was necessarily practicing. There was some question whether or not he was academically eligible and what he was able to do. And they apparently had been pretty wary. I mean, I think Kobe had been dealing with some personal issues and trying to kind of work through it. And eventually he said, I don't think I can play this year. I don't think I'm going to play. And so the fact that they were able to get Elijah Wood pretty quickly leads me to believe that they were pretty worried about Kobe King leaving. They kind of let on that they were pretty confident, but I think that in general, when a kid announces that he's leaving and then within hours you have a new kid, that means that you've been talking to that kid for a while. So from what I understand, I would be surprised if Kobe King plays college basketball next year. I don't know if he's looking at other schools. He hasn't talked to anybody really. I don't think that he's looked at playing at other schools and getting a waiver. I don't think he's going to go to the NBA. So you kind of hope and pray that he's okay and everything works out there. It's kind of an unfortunate deal. And I mean, he was going to be a key guy next year. I mean, I imagined he was going to start. There was a potential for him to be maybe the second or third leading scorer. They were able to do a lot of things with him. He fit their two guard exactly perfect. So that's too bad. He's also a good defender, long, he can do a lot of things for you. So losing him is a big deal. Adding Elijah Wood is really interesting because Nebraska doesn't typically recruit true freshmen out of high school that they don't expect to play right away. So him coming to Nebraska leads you to believe that he's going to play right away. Trying to kind of figure out the rationale behind bringing him on. It sounds like Elijah understands that he's pretty thin. He's 6'5", 190. He could use some Big Ten bulk. He could use some time in the weight room. And I don't think he's going to necessarily redshirt by any means, but it sounds like he understands that it's going to take a little bit for him to get on the floor. With that said, they really like, Elijah as a guard. They like, his skill set. I think he's a little bit raw. I don't necessarily think he's going to play a ton, but I think that there's plenty of opportunity for him to find the floor. I mean, the one thing Fred Hoiberg, I've talked about this many times, the one thing that I'm most impressed by Fred Hoiberg's in-game coaching is in the final 10 minutes, the five guys that are playing the best are generally on the floor, or typically on the floor. And Elijah Wood is a guy that if he gets hot, maybe he's on the floor quite a bit, but I would be somewhat surprised if that happened because I think that he understands again. So it's kind of like taking a kid who is maybe not going to redshirt. If he gets hot, he plays quite a bit, but understands that if he takes a back seat, that's okay. Now, a lot of kids say that, right? Coming in, they say, I'm okay, maybe not playing as much or not being a starter and all these things. And then, but at the same time, they like his skill set enough that if they feel like they needed to throw him out there, that they feel good about it. So that's kind of where that's at. He's on campus. He's been tested. He's able to work out now. So everybody is on campus. So there's 3 people that are not on campus. Thor and Ivan remain overseas, and that's based on U.S. travel restrictions. Thor is in Iceland. Ivan's in France. Both of those countries are, the COVID cases have drastically declined. In Iceland, they've, for like almost more than a month, their new daily cases are in the single digits. So it's just one of those things where once the U.S. is able to bring in people from Iceland, I think Thor will have no problem. France, I don't really know. I think that's a little bit trickier. A
couple of days ago, I looked at the list of countries. Like it's kind of, everything about this is a little bit unfathomable. But like when you, as a college basketball reporter, are checking the U.S. State Department.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And travel advisory list to see like, okay, what countries are restricted, if you're a foreign national from France, Creighton has added 2 recruits, one from Georgia, one from Lithuania. Like,
so what's their situation? Are they able to travel? I mean, they can't, right?
Lithuanians can't come into the U.S. right now.
Right. So that's the thing is France is allowing people to travel outside of the EU, outside of EU countries, but there's a select number of those countries, and the United States is not on it. Like Canada is, Australia is, a lot of major countries are, but the United States is not. So it's not really France and Iceland that is holding us up. It's the U.S. So those 2 are not on campus. I've seen them post videos of them working out. I know that they're in contact with the coaches and all that. Shmuel Stevenson is also not on campus. He is back in Canada. Nothing to super worry about there, I don't think. That was just kind of a personal decision to kind of stay back and stay with his family. And they expect him to, once practices actually start, I believe that's July 20th, they expect him to be there. They're hoping that Thor and Ivan can make it. But it's one of those things where it's like, well, it's not up to, like, there's nothing that the basketball program can do. It's up to literally the U.S. government. Yeah. And it's like, there's not much leeway. And I think that the hope is, international students are a pretty big part of, universities all over the country. And so I think that there's a hope that there's some sort of exception where, if you're enrolled in a university in America, you can travel, get a visa, or however that works. I don't really know. So that's kind of where that's at. I do want to respond to a couple things that I got on Twitter, which I appreciated people responding. I got a lot of duplicates. And I like to do that occasionally just to see, like, what are people interested in and what are they thinking about? And a lot of people are thinking about Dalano Banton, which makes sense because Nebraska has really pushed Dalano Banton as kind of their next guy. And he's a really, really interesting case study because, his 1 year at Western Kentucky, he didn't do much. He averaged 3.4 points, 3.0 rebounds, and 2.1 assists a game. And now, with that said, James Palmer at Miami did almost nothing and then came to Nebraska and was a total star. And you'll see this on occasion where kids go to schools and they're not great and they transfer somewhere else and they are really good. Royce White at Minnesota, right? He didn't really play at Minnesota, but didn't really work out there. Comes to Iowa State, becomes a star. So the question that I got from quite a few people were, what's the expectations for him and who is a comparable comparison? Like what can Nebraska fans actually expect? So this is what I did. Okay. I was like, okay, well, let's look at his stats, right? 3.4 points, 3 rebounds, 2.1 assists. And that was in like 15 minutes of play. So I was like, okay, well, let's just naturally double that. And let's say he plays 30 minutes a game, which I could totally see. So let's double it. So it's like 6.8 points, 6 rebounds, 4.2 assists. And then I was like, well, let's give him the benefit of the doubt that he maybe got a little bit better and he's going to be the main guy. So let's bump it up to like 10 points, So that's like 3 more points a game. Let's give him 1 more rebound and 1 more assist. So that's 10, 7, and 5 averaging, which pretty good. So then I looked up, okay, over the past 20 years, who are some guys that have averaged basically that, and who do they play for, and what did I look up? So I looked it up, and obviously there's like Big Ten Players of the Year that average that or better. So like Denzel Valentine, Evan Turner. And I was like, well, I mean, I wouldn't expect Dalano to score like 20 a game like those guys did. So I went to the points category, and I was like, let's look somebody that is going to be a little bit less of a scorer, like 12 points a game, 10 points a game. Because I think that Dalano is really, really talented, but I think that his talent comes from being so versatile and not necessarily a volume scorer. And also you've got Kobe Webster and Teddy Allen and Shamil Stevenson and Mayen, and you've got guys that can score. So Dalano, I think, is going to be asked to do more than just score. And somebody that popped up near the bottom is a guy who is 6'8", just like Dalano. And as a sophomore, like Dalano, scored 13.4 points a game, 9.3 rebounds, 5 assists, right? So that fits in there. A little bit better, though. That was Royce White at Iowa State under Fred Hoiberg. So I think it's generally fair. The difference is that Royce White was 270 and Dalano is probably about 200 now. Like hopefully maybe 205, 210. So there's a big difference there in terms of like power. But I think it's fair to say that Fred Hoiberg is going to use Dalano in extremely similar ways that they used Royce White and George Niang. And that's not a huge leap because that's what they brought Dalano in to do on the offense, be kind of the point guard for the hybrid that they like to call. So I think that I would be surprised if Dalano had 9 rebounds a game. Royce was just a monster. And he was such a matchup nightmare in a Big 12 conference that wasn't quite ready for what Iowa State was doing. So I think that in general, you look at Royce White and you think, okay, maybe a little bit more of a slasher, maybe a little bit more finesse, but the same type of game. And because it's the same system and it's the same type of setup, right? Royce was a sophomore. His first year he was playing at Iowa State, the only year he played at Iowa State. And that's what Delano's going to do. Sophomore, second year.
I'm so curious about his game, man.
Me too,
like,
man.
The question I have is just about his scoring ability. Like, because it seems like Nebraska's going to need somebody to score. Now, the offense will kind of create that naturally to just like it'll open jump shots or easy buckets for guys to take advantage of. But they're also going to need a go-to guy, and it seems like he's that guy. But is he more of a facilitator, runner of offense versus a scorer? Like, can he shoot? Now, I will say, as a kind of a semi-counter to that, is at 6'8", well, even though he is a little bit slender, he's probably going to be in a lot of mismatched scenarios. Like,
right,
to defend him with, I mean, maybe you can find like a 6'5" longer guard to kind of stick with him. But I would imagine Nebraska's going to play small often, so he'll kind of be like the pseudo 4. And so a team will, if they have their 6'10", 250-pound dude out there, whatever.
That's going to be then Nebraska's going to be licking their chops.
Right. So
that's the thing is,
he's going to force teams to adjust.
Yeah, he is.
And then allow maybe some of Nebraska's strengths to kind of come to the forefront a little bit more.
Yeah.
So, but I'm intrigued by the it's kind of like that go-to responsibility. If he's going to feel that he has to do it, can he do it without being too turnover prone and making too many mistakes or pressing? I think having a guy like Kobe King on the roster would have taken a little bit of weight off his shoulders in that realm or in that facet. And I guess the ability for Kobe Webster to adjust to this level and to this team quickly becomes even more important.
I completely agree. And it's interesting too, because I think that part of this is the way that Delano, I think that like the way Cam Mack played is kind of what they would want Dalano to play.
That's what I'm envisioning.
Because Cam wasn't a scorer.
He didn't really score, and then a lot of times didn't even look for himself.
Exactly. And so that's why it's like I don't imagine he's going to score 13. Like I think Dalano has the ability to, but I think that there could be games where he has more rebounds and assists than he does points, just based on you've got a volume shooter in Kobe Webster, volume shooter in Teddy Allen. You've got Dalano creating. And so that's I'm just really interested how it's going to actually go. And at the same time, too, like you hope that he's as good as they think he is, and that he is as good at picking up the offense as they hope he does. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I think that Dalano is going to continue to be the storyline up until the season actually begins. I think we're going to hear a lot about him in the lead up to the season and at the beginning of the season. Some other guys that I got a question about Lat Mayen. I've heard a lot of really good things about Lat Mayen being on campus. I think that he's going to – Fred Hoiberg said it when he had this teleconference about the 2020 class. He said, I love everything about the kid. And I think that they've been pleasantly surprised how good this kid is, what he's going to potentially be able to do in terms of stretching the floor. Something that I thought of when they signed that class that I wrote was they've got kind of all these potential big men, big men now with Lat Mayen and Derek Walker and Ivan Drago and the new freshman Eduardo Andre, and kind of how do you rotate those guys and what do you get from each of them? And I think that Lat gives you a lot of stuff offensively, and I think is a little bit longer on the defensive end that he's going to be able to maybe not protect the rim like Eduardo Andre can, but as good or maybe a little bit better than Ivan could. And I don't know. I think, and then you've got Derek Walker, who I've always kind of penciled in as a starter, just based on, I think they really like his vocal leadership. I think that he was on really good Tennessee teams. He knows what he's doing. He can stretch the floor. I think he's kind of a versatile guy, but I think just the way that Lat has impressed early, I think that I've heard really good things about him. So that's something to think about. And then
is Lat Mayen eligible?
Yes.
Okay.
He
so
is.
He was TCU, then JUCO.
Yes.
Then Nebraska. So he's
correct.
In.
So to give everybody a sense, and so I'm going to give my final thing would be I'm going to give really quickly who I envision as the starting five is, but just to give everybody a sense of who is eligible to play, because they have 13 scholarship guys and 11 are eligible, and that does not count Trey McGowan's. Trey McGowan's is not eligible yet. He needs a waiver. Kobe King's waiver was a lot easier than Trey McGowan's, and so if they get Trey eligible, that changes things. But I'm working under the assumption that he's not going to be eligible because I think it's easier to think about it that way.
Did Trey McGowan's commit, or did he announce his decision to transfer before the virus hit, or was that kind of around the same time? Because I wonder.
Let's see.
I don't
April
even know.
4th.
Yeah, that was. We're in the middle of the virus at that point. I don't know if that matters at all, but
that's what I imagine everybody's going to put. You wanted to leave the East Coast where there was a lot of COVID and go to the Midwest where there wasn't any.
Yeah.
Or not as much, I guess.
Hard to argue with that, I think.
True. But, yes, it is. You'd have to it's difficult though, because it's like he's going further away from family. Yeah. That's what everybody else is going to say, so you have to make it different.
Right.
Anyway, so
yeah, is the NCAA just going to say if you write down on your transfer waiver request that like coronavirus impacted your decision, then it's like, okay.
I think they should just give everybody just like, okay, 1 year, do it, because it's going to happen anyway in a year.
Yeah, I know.
I think they should just do it early, because seriously, like everybody is going to put COVID, everybody, and because of your point of like it's kind of hard to argue.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Anyway, so Trey McGowan's not eligible right now, but
Trey McGowan's is not. Trevor Lakes is not. He's going to redshirt. So the starting five that I've got, and then I'll go through the bench, is Kobe Webster, Dalano Banton. Those are kind of your ones. Teddy Allen, Shamil Stevenson. Those are like your 3s and 4s. and then Lat Mayen at the 5. And then coming off the bench in some sort of way, you've got Derek Walker, Thor, who I think Kobe King leaving means that Thor is going to play more. Ivan, Eduardo Andre, Elijah Wood, and Nicole Rote. I mean, I think Elijah Wood, somebody you could see come in, 13-minute mark, and Kobe Webster or Teddy needs a blow, and they can come in. He can come in for a minute or two, and if he's playing well, maybe they keep Teddy on the bench and kind of keep him going. Cole, I don't really know. I mean, I'm not sure how much he'll play again. He showed some good stuff at the end of last year whenever they were down to, only a handful of scholarship players. I mean, he seriously was, I remember it in my mind. I remember many things about the night Nebraska played Indiana in the Big Ten tournament, but one of them was just Cole was one of the most athletic people on the floor. And so he could rebound, like he can block some shots. The worst call I've ever seen in my entire life was when Nicole Rote absolutely obliterated a shot, blocked it, and they called a foul. I thought that Fred was going to lose his mind. So like he's really athletic. He fits like a Division I athlete profile. I just don't know where he fits in on this roster and kind of where his minutes come from. But you hope he's able to, again, be a guy that can come in and give somebody a blow a little bit. But I think that with Kobe King leaving, a lot of the season falls on Dalano, Kobe Webster, and Teddy Allen. I think Teddy's going to have to be a stud. From everything that I've heard about Teddy in the last couple months, he's doing well. He's impressing people. I heard a story of him playing against Hunter Salas at kind of a run somewhere in Omaha, and just kind of like working the kid, which is good for Hunter. But Teddy's, I think good things are coming out from there. So you hope that he has a good season. It'd be really nice. Kobe Webster shot really well and was efficient, and Dalano ran the offense really well. So I'm curious. Now, again, this is just my opinion. I'm not paid $3.5 million a year because I'm not worth that, and I'm not Fred Hoiberg. But just based on conversations and figuring out in my head how this team might work, that's kind of the way I envision it right this second. Now, again, maybe Ivan comes back and he's in great shape and it's exactly the body type that they wanted, and he's improved his shot and he can steal minutes at the 5. Maybe Eduardo Andre is way better than they thought he was going to be. He's a shot blocking machine. He can get in there. Maybe Thor is just like, basically JJ Redick, and it's just like a 45% 3-point shooter because all he's done is shoot in Iceland, and he can go in there. Things could change, but that's kind of the way that I see it at this second.
I feel like the best offensive lineup is those 5 guys you mentioned, but sub out Stevenson and put Thor in there.
I actually agree. Yeah.
Maybe I don't want to overrate Thor's shooting ability, but like he had a stretch there where he was on fire last year. So
that's super small, but I really like it.
I guess the biggest question for this team is going to be like, what kind of impact defensively do Stevenson, Walker, Andre, Ivan can get on the boards more consistently? Mayen, like the new additions, what does that do to Nebraska's ability to just get a stop?
Right.
To take away an opponent's first or second option, and then to get that rebound, and then to go.
Which is why I think Eduardo Andre is a really good sign, because I think he's going to be their best quote unquote rim protector. And I think that they've got enough. It's interesting because I think they have enough.
But will they play him just for that?
That's what I mean. That's why I'm so interested with the rotation of the big men, because it's like they don't have one guy that checks all the boxes, and hardly anybody actually does. You know what I mean? Like hardly anybody does all these things. But I think that he's a good sign because, again, if you're playing a bigger team, if you're playing, Ohio State or Michigan State or Michigan, and you have to, what's that big Michigan guy's name? Castleton, like Carl Castleton or something Castle something. And he's basically the new John Teskey. He's big long dude. And you put Eduardo Andre in there instead of Lyman. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So that's what I mean is on one hand, it's like you don't have quite exactly what you need. At the same time, though, like I said, Fred is really good at picking who is playing well and diagnosing the exact game and the exact lineup that he needs for things to go well. And so maybe Eduardo again is playing really well, and you throw him out there, and you keep him, and you put Ladd on the bench, or Derek Walker's really playing well, or Thor's really playing well. Like I think that they have enough guys that are good at specific things that they can create kind of a nice lineup in the last 10 minutes specific to that game. The other thing I will say too, I think that this team is significantly more mature than the last team, that they are harder workers, and they just have a general better sense of what it takes to be a college athlete. And that is a very big step up. And that's the advantage of getting a guy like Kobe Webster, who has been in college basketball for some time, and Shamil, who has also, and Teddy, who has had to grow up, and Derek Walker, who's been around. And having a mature lineup is really nice. And again, if Trey McGowan's is eligible, then I think Trey is your starter, and then you've got Kobe Webster that comes off the bench potentially, and then you've got a really nice mature lineup. Generally, Fred Hoiberg's teams have been some of the oldest teams in terms of age in college basketball. When he was at Iowa State, it was that way, and it's typically this. Last year's team was so young and so inexperienced, right. And so that's kind of a nice step forward too. So we'll see. I mean, obviously, it's a long ways between now and college basketball happening and starting, and you know what I mean.
But
so we'll see. But I will say, I mean, things are generally, I think, going pretty well in Nebraska basketball land.
Do you want me to tell my John Rothstein story before we leave?
Oh, yes, I do. So hold on real quick. So this was prompted because somebody tweeted at me a very fantastic tweet of a question, which was, does John Rothstein tweet or text Fred Hoiberg before basketball games? Because John Rothstein does that often, as we saw in a FOIA from a newsletter during the season. First off, John Rothstein does. Second off, Fred does not respond.
So the question is whether or not you're who tweeted it? Was his name? What was his name?
Hold on, it was really, really good. Because I want to give him credit. Hold on, give me a second.
Yeah, the big question is whether or not he thought because you said, "Hey, I'm gonna record a half court press podcast with John," and if he thought that meant it's Josh who tweeted, I think.
Oh yeah, Josh. Thank you, Josh.
Josh was like, "Is that?" I don't know if he meant. I'm sorry to disappoint if he thought Rothstein was going to get on this Zoom with you, Heady. It's John Nyatawa instead. But it sparked an idea in my mind, or a memory of mine, that I thought I'd share. So this was the first year on the beat for me covering Creighton, and I was headed out to Seton Hall for a game, I think in February, and the Jays had suffered the big injury to their point guard, Maurice Watson, and they were kind of reconfiguring a little bit. And I got this email from a CBS PR guy who was like, "Hey, could you chat with John Rothstein?" And in my mind, I was like, "Oh yeah, I can chat with John Rothstein." I thought he was doing the game. He was like doing sideline for CBS Sports Network or something. And I thought it was like a sharing notes session where he's kind of like wants to pick my brain about where Creighton's at and all this stuff, and of like, where's the roster and what are they doing to tinker without their point guard. And that was not it. Rothstein, it was set up for me to interview Rothstein, who is the national college basketball analyst, so of course that's what it makes sense, where I pick his brain about Creighton, its standing in college basketball, the Big East, the national scene, everything that you would do when you interview a national analyst. You see that thing from time to time, especially on sports talk radio. So that was what he thought. So he called me, and he was like, "Hey, what's up?" And I go, "Oh, man, what's up with you?" And he's like, "Nothing. What can I do for you?" I said, "What can I do for you?" and he was like, "You got any questions for me?" I said, "No, man, I don't. What you any questions for me?" And before I realized what had happened, he'd hung up, and he was just like, "I guess something must have been a miscommunication. I'll talk to you later. Bye." And like as he hung up, I was like, oh, oh, he didn't want to talk to me. Why would he want to talk to me?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so
But for some reason, I like it must have been the way I read the email when I first got it. It was like I thought it was just a TV guy who just kind of wanted to get some insight.
So you could share it on. Yeah.
Get a better idea of hey, this is how I'm going to cover this game. Just to be prepared. But no, it was not that. And so I had to I apologized to him at the game, but I don't think that he appreciated it. It's like kind of got big timed a little bit by me accidentally wasting his time. But that's my job.
I mean,
interaction.
One, that's funny, and two, like there is an assumption there that he would know more about the team that you're covering than you do, and you cover them on a day-to-day basis. Right. So I would have the exact same reaction.
But then again, in college basketball,
you get kind of the 30,000 feet view, and you get like I understand that too.
And they have really good. I mean, college coaches in basketball are really accessible. I was coming from the football realm, where everything's more Fort Knoxy in college football. Even for national guys, it can be hard to penetrate and learn some of the insight. And I used to have conversations like that all the time with regional, national reporters. So I came from that world and entered college basketball, and I was mistaken.
That's fantastic. That's awesome.
All right, if Nebraska and Creighton played today, who'd win?
Who's Creighton? Are they on campus yet still?
We got Reef on campus. Reef Mitchell on campus.
Won.
Yeah.
I got to say, I think Nebraska would win.
Yeah, I think so too. Chris, it was fun. We'll be back in a couple weeks. Maybe we can do a similar Creighton-style breakdown, an update on where they stand. But right now, they're not on campus, so
it's harder for that. Yeah,
there's no movement, but we can kind of look ahead to the 2021 season in a similar way that you did with Nebraska. Good stuff. Appreciate you. Thank you guys for listening.